Antarctica. Number 5 in size out of Earth's 7 continents. Bigger than Europe, it's the driest, coldest, and windiest continent on Earth. And without question, the single most unique place I've seen on this entire trip. Such untouched and raw nature. One of the most perfectly preserved regions on the planet. Time seems to stand still there. An inaccessible frozen world. It's like an alien landscape. The coldest place you can find. Snow-covered mountains right next to the ocean. Glaciers, floating icebergs in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Albatrosses, whales, orcas, seals, and many species of penguins. They call it the last true wilderness on Earth. Hey, my name is Neal. Thanks for joining. In this video, I'm going to talk about the experiences I had visiting Antarctica. Oh my, Antarctica is a beautiful place, as you will soon discover as well. But it's not easy to reach. You have to travel from South America down over the Drake Passage, which is a body of water that is notoriously difficult to cross. On board, I learned a lot from different experts that were there. So we learned, for example, about Antarctic explorers and the race they had to reach the South Pole, which is an epic and tragic story. I also learned about the different wildlife that is there and details about the icy climate. Of course, when we arrive, I will share a lot of information and footage on the scenery that was there. And I will end the video with answering questions which I think a lot of you might have about Antarctica. So having said that, let's get started. This is Antarctica. To even reach Antarctica from South America, you first have to cross the Drake Passage. 2 full days sailing through what's infamously known as the roughest seas on Earth. Waves here can reach up to 25 meters, and over the centuries, the Drake Passage is estimated to have claimed around 20,000 sailors' lives and wrecked 800 vessels. This isn't ancient history either. As recently as 2022, a cruise ship crossing the Drake Passage was hit by a massive rogue wave that broke windows, killed a passenger, and injured several others. So yes, I was mentally bracing myself for the worst, but we got lucky. For whatever reason, our crossing was actually relatively calm. After the Drake Passage, we would pass the South Shetland Islands, then Deception Island, an active horseshoe-shaped volcano with a massive flooded caldera you could actually sail into through a narrow 230-meter passage called Neptune's Bellows. From there, we would enter the Antarctic Peninsula in West Antarctica, crossing the Bransfield Strait, where we would spend 2 nights and 2 days close to Le Maire Island. Before we even arrived at the continent, the ship brought on board a geologist, an Antarctic expedition leader, and a maritime and polar historian, and one of them walked us through just how young and how brutal the history of Antarctic exploration really is. Glenn, a maritime and polar historian, took us through some Antarctic history. The first confirmed sighting of Antarctica happened during a Russian expedition on January 28, 1820. But the first brief footsteps on the continent didn't happen until 75 years later, in 1895, by Carsten Borchgrevink. That same Borchgrevink, during the Southern Cross expedition of 1899 to 1900, was the first to winter over for a year on the continent, and remarkably, their hut is still standing today. That success kicked off a full-blown century of Antarctic expeditions. Captain Robert Falcon Scott led the Discovery expedition from 1901 to 1904, mapping large new areas of the continent's interior. But the story everyone remembers is the race to the South Pole. 2 teams, 2 philosophies, 1 prize. Scott returned with the Terra Nova expedition, that's the name of their ship, of 1910 to 1913, also called the British Antarctic Expedition, bringing 34 dogs, 3 motor sledges, and 19 Siberian ponies. Meanwhile, Roald Amundsen led a Norwegian expedition from 1910 to 1912, relying on 52 dogs and skis. Amundsen and his 4 companions reached the geographic South Pole first on December 14, 1911. They made it back to their starting base safely, having covered 3,440 kilometers in 99 days. Coincidentally, almost the exact same duration as our complete peaceboat journey will take. Scott's team of 5 didn't reach the pole until January 17, 1912, only to find the Norwegian flag already planted there. It gets worse. All 5 men from Scott's team died on the return journey. The last 3 died just 18 kilometers from a depot that could have saved them. Their broader expedition did still bring back scientifically valuable samples, but the human cost of that effort was steep. More recently, there's been a real effort to keep this place protected. In 1991, the International Association of Antarctica Tour Operators, IAATO, was founded to promote safe and environmentally responsible travel to the continent. Antarctica is formally designated a natural reserve, dedicated to peace and science. Every passenger on our ship went through some education to become what they call an Antarctic ambassador, essentially vowing to help protect it. On board Peaceboat, like I mentioned earlier, we had a series of expert talks that completely changed how I understood this place. One of our speakers was Susan Addy, a renowned polar conservationist, educator, and expedition leader who has personally guided over hundreds of voyages to Antarctica. She currently serves as president of the American Polar Society and previously developed IAATO's own Antarctic ambassadorship program. When someone with that kind of authority and experience is standing in front of you explaining this ecosystem, you listen closely. She explained that everything here starts with krill, small marine crustaceans. Krill is the primary food source for whales, seals, and penguins, but it takes years for krill to reach adulthood, and it feeds by scraping plant material off the underside of sea ice with its feet. No ice means no krill. No krill means no whales and no penguins. It's a single point of failure for an entire ecosystem, and it's exactly why the growing human krill fishing industry, largely to feed salmon farms, is such a serious threat to Antarctica. All the great oceans, Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian, meet in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica. Susan introduced the Antarctic Convergence, an invisible boundary in the Southern Ocean around Antarctica where the water temperature shifts from around 6 degrees Celsius outside the zone to just 1 or 2 degrees Celsius inside it. Everything living inside that ring has adapted specifically to that cold water. On whales, she outlined that orcas are matriarchal. A female leads each pod, typically with her daughters and granddaughters, while the males follow along, waiting for opportunities. She also taught us how to identify individual whale species just from the way their tail, back, fin, and blowhole break the surface, and walked us through the mechanics of filter feeding that's common for whales. Then there was Dr. Keith, a geologist, who talked about how 97% of Earth's waters is in the ocean. Of the remaining 3%, the vast majority is locked up in glaciers. If Antarctica's ice sheets were to fully melt, global sea levels would rise by 60 meters. For comparison, if Greenland fully melted, it would raise sea levels by 7.5 meters. Antarctica is actually made up of 2 ancient, geologically distinct continents, East and West Antarctica, fused together under the ice. And underneath all that ice is solid rock, mountain ranges, canyons, an entire hidden continental landscape. Something that surprised me was the following fact. There are 91 known volcanoes across Antarctica. This includes the one on Deception Island, which we sailed straight by, and which last erupted in 1969. And depending on where you are on the continent, you can experience 6 full months of daylight followed by 6 full months of darkness. Another of Dr. Keith's talks was about glaciers and climate change, and it was alarming. Glaciers are considered one of the most accurate tools we have for tracking long-term environmental change because they exist all over the world, not just here. With the exception of a single glacier, every glacier on Earth is currently shrinking. In Peru, rivers are drying up because the glaciers that feed them are retreating. The North Pole's floating sea ice is shrinking year over year too. If the world keeps going like this, we might bring about the unimaginable scenario of Antarctica without ice. Here's the part that we all already know, but still hits again when you hear it. Looking at temperature records going back 650,000 years, the trend was naturally downward, until the Industrial Revolution and the population explosion that followed it. Since then, driven by rising CO2 and methane, temperatures have been climbing sharply. In Antarctica specifically, we're already looking at over 3.5 degrees of warming. Dr. Keith didn't sugarcoat it. He called climate change probably the most important issue of our time. He said the decisions we make now will shape a future that might arrive sooner than we think. It's a strange thing, sitting in a warm lecture room, learning this, and then walking out onto the deck an hour later, seeing the actual glaciers he was talking about, right there in front of you. So with that in the back of our minds, we arrive in Antarctica. And it was cold there, but not as cold as I imagined. It was around 0 degrees Celsius. So even though I have a small backpack with limited things, I was able to keep myself warm through layering my clothes. On the first day, the visibility was limited because there were quite a lot of clouds. But on the second day, it cleared up completely and we had blue skies and the visibility was amazing. Get ready to see penguins, whales, and have sauna time in Antarctica. Let's keep going. And then we arrived in Antarctica. We spent 2 full days here and we got incredibly lucky with the weather. Day 1 was cloudy, misty, with low visibility. But on day 2, the skies completely cleared up. Blue skies, full sunshine, and visibility so good that a passenger who had been to Antarctica multiple times told me they had never once seen conditions this perfect. Lucky me. While we were out on the deck, Susan Eddy would be audible over the ship's speakers constantly, announcing spotted wildlife. On starboard, a humpback whale, and everybody would drop what they were doing and rush to see it. I watched whales breach out of the water and watched them show their tails as they dove back down. I watched penguins swimming, gathering along the coastline, and moving in single file lines along what are actually called penguin highways, dedicated walking routes they use over and over. One small detail of the ship I loved especially here in the cold. There was a sauna on board, and using it in Antarctica became one of my favorite rituals. Walking around the ship deck in your swimwear in freezing air, then stepping back into the heat. Warm up, cool down, and repeat. There was a group of enthusiastic sauna goers that would do this all together. The contrast between the people in swimwear and the fully clothed passengers made for some cool pictures. Sauna in Antarctica. It's one of those memories that's going to stick with me. And then the sunsets. Blue and gold skies behind white snow-covered mountains and floating ice. Genuinely just magical sunsets. Before I wrap up, let me answer some questions you might have about this place. Does anyone live in Antarctica? No, there are no people living there. No indigenous population, no permanent citizens. Just seasonal researchers, somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 people depending on the time of year. Plus all the wildlife. IAATO rules require people who are there to stay at least 5 meters away from any animal to not disturb them. Who owns Antarctica? Nobody. It's governed neutrally under the Antarctic Treaty System, genuinely one of the more remarkable examples of international cooperation on the planet, keeping an entire continent demilitarized and dedicated purely to peace and science. Do you need a visa to visit Antarctica? Not for the continent itself, but you'll need permits through your home country or tour operator and a visa for whichever country you depart from, typically Argentina or Chile. What time is it in Antarctica? That's a trick question. There isn't one time. Research stations just use GMT, their home country's time, or time of their nearest supply hub. Since the South Pole sits on every line of longitude, Antarctica technically touches every time zone at once. How cold does it get in Antarctica? The coldest temperature ever recorded on the ground was minus 89.2 degrees Celsius on July 21st, 1983 at Vostok Station. It's colder inland than on the coasts. Winter inland can hit minus 40 to minus 70 degrees Celsius, while the coast stays around minus 15 to minus 35. In summer, inland sits around minus 25, and the coast can actually reach zero. The peninsula, where we were, is the warmest region and can reach 15 degrees Celsius in summer. When I was there, it hovered right around 0 degrees Celsius. How do you get to Antarctica? By ship from South America, that's the closest continent, with Ushuaia as the main departure hub, just like I used. If you want to skip sailing the Drake Passage entirely, there's a pricier option. You can fly by specialized aircraft to King George Island and board an expedition ship from there. When can you visit Antarctica? Only during the southern hemisphere's summer, October through March. That's when the sea ice breaks up enough for ships to approach. There's daylight and wildlife arrives to breed, feed and raise their young. In winter, sea ice locks the coastline. Darkness can last for extended stretches, and blizzards bring winds and temperatures deep into the minus, and evacuation becomes impossible, so travel simply isn't an option. What is the cost to visit Antarctica? Anywhere from around 6,000 to 30,000 euros, depending on trip length, ship quality and how much luxury you want. And that's before factoring in getting yourself to Ushuaia in the first place. Which is why I'm happy I took the peaceboat route instead. It can end up cheaper than a dedicated Antarctica cruise, while also taking you to dozens of other amazing places around the world in the same trip. The last true wilderness. That's what they call Antarctica. And after having spent 2 days there, I understand why they call it that way. It was without a doubt the highlight of my peaceboat journey. I hope this video gave you a sense of how beautiful, but also how fragile and significant Antarctica is. It's a place worth protecting before it's gone.